Vigilante justice, a concept as old as civilization itself. But what happens when a victim of a crime takes matters into their own hands? When the pursuit of vengeance blurs the line between hero and villain? 1. The crime. It always starts with a tragedy, a crime that leaves scars deeper than any physical wound. For some, justice through the legal system isn't enough. The pain, the anger, the loss, it's unbearable. And in that moment, something snaps. Imagine losing someone you love to a senseless act of violence. The court process drags on, the legal jargon confusing, the punishments too lenient. The perpetrator gets a few years behind bars, maybe less, but the hole in your life, it's permanent. No sentence can heal the shattered lives left in the wake of such horror. And that's when the line between right and wrong begins to blur. For those standing on the edge, vengeance becomes the only clear path forward. Not the calm, calculated justice society preaches, but raw, visceral revenge. It's an urge so powerful that it consumes them, turning grief into something far more dangerous. The system failed them, and in its failure, they see their own solution. This is the beginning of a transformation, where the victim becomes something else entirely. Fueled by a need to balance the scales, they step outside the bounds of law and morality. They become vigilantes, willing to do what no one else will. In their mind, they're restoring order to a world gone mad. But in pursuing their own form of justice, they risk becoming the very thing they swore to destroy. What starts as a quest for redemption can easily spiral into obsession. The thirst for revenge is never satisfied, always demanding more. And with each act of violence, the lines between hero and villain blur until nothing is left but darkness. 2. Transformation into a vigilante. Some say vigilante justice is born from a desire to protect. Others argue it's pure revenge. But for those who take the law into their own hands, the journey is rarely simple. It's a descent into moral ambiguity. At first, the line between right and wrong seems clear. A crime has been committed, the guilty walk free, and someone must act. For the vigilante, it's not just about retribution, but a need to restore order to a world where justice has failed. They see themselves as a protector, stepping up where others have fallen short. But as the first act of vengeance is carried out, something shifts. The initial rush of power, the feeling of being in control, it's intoxicating. And with it comes the temptation to keep going. What started as a response to one wrong quickly spirals. The more they act, the less they see the consequences of their actions. The lines between protecting the innocent and becoming the aggressor start to blur. In seeking to uphold their version of justice, they lose sight of the values that initially drove them. They become judge, jury, and executioner, all in one. The moral descent isn't always immediate. It's gradual, with each step further into the darkness feeling justified. But the cost of this pursuit is high, not just for those they target, but for the vigilante themselves. The weight of their actions begins to change them, and soon, they're no different from the criminals they hunt. In the end, the vigilante's path leads not to justice, but to isolation. The descent into moral ambiguity has no easy resolution, and the question remains, at what point does a protector become a villain? 3. The first act of justice. In the beginning, it's clear. The criminals are the bad guys. They're the ones who deserve punishment. The vigilante is a hero, right? At first glance, it seems simple. A vigilante steps in when the system fails, delivering justice where the law has faltered. They're seen as a champion, someone brave enough to stand up against those who prey on the innocent. It's easy to root for them because the world they inhabit is painted in black and white. Criminals deserve to be punished, and if the law won't do it, then someone must. It feels right, but as the vigilante takes action, cracks begin to show. What seemed like a righteous cause starts to reveal complexities that weren't so obvious in the heat of the moment. The criminals, once painted as pure evil, may have their own stories, circumstances that led them down a dark path. Suddenly, the simplicity of good versus evil isn't so simple anymore. The vigilante, too, starts to change. The initial sense of justice becomes muddied by the growing power they wield. They no longer just punish the guilty, they decide who's guilty. The rules of society, once a guiding light, no longer apply. It's no longer about justice, it's about control. As the body count rises, so does the question. Who holds the vigilante accountable? The answer becomes unsettling. No one. In their pursuit of righteousness, they've become a force beyond law, beyond morality. The line between hero and villain starts to blur, and soon, the vigilante may find themselves closer to the criminals they sought to punish than they ever imagined. In the end, what started as a clear battle of good versus evil dissolves into chaos. The hero is no longer so easily defined. 4. Crossing the line. At what point does a vigilante become no different from the criminals they hunt? When does justice become personal vendetta? The line between justice and vengeance is razor thin, and for a vigilante, it can be all too easy to cross. Initially, their actions may seem noble, a response to the system's failure to protect the innocent. They target those who have slipped through the cracks of the law, delivering a form of justice that feels deserved. But as time goes on, the purity of their intentions becomes clouded. Each act of violence begins to change them, and the question arises: are they still fighting for justice, or have they descended into something darker? Vigilantes often start with a code, a set of rules to keep their actions in check. But as the adrenaline rush of power and control grows, so does the temptation to bend those rules. It's no longer just about stopping a crime. It's about settling scores, feeding a need for retribution. The more personal the fight becomes, the harder it is to distinguish between right and wrong. When a vigilante begins to enjoy the punishment they deliver, when they seek out their targets with a sense of personal satisfaction, that's when justice transforms into a vendetta. Their actions become driven by anger, pain, or even a desire to prove themselves superior. At this point, they stop being the solution and start becoming part of the problem. The vigilante's original mission to protect and uphold justice slips away, replaced by a singular focus: revenge. They may not realize it, but they have become exactly what they swore to fight against. The difference between the vigilante and the criminal is no longer one of morality. It's simply a matter of perspective. Both are now ruled by violence. 5. The consequences. Vigilante justice is a path filled with moral landmines. What starts as righteous fury can quickly spiral into a never-ending cycle of violence. Initially, the vigilante believes they are restoring balance, righting wrongs that the system ignored. Their actions seem justified, even noble. But as time passes, the lines between right and wrong blur, and the consequences of their choices grow darker. Each act of retribution pushes them further away from their original ideals. Violence becomes a tool, but also a trap, one that breeds more violence. The thirst for justice turns into an insatiable hunger for control, and the vigilante begins to lose sight of what they were fighting for in the first place. Eventually, they must face a terrifying question. Am I still the hero of this story, or have I become the villain? In their quest to punish evil, they risk becoming the very thing they swore to destroy. And once that line is crossed, there's often no way back. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories that push the limits of law, morality, and survival.